I had no idea my new client used to be my neighbor until I pulled up to her house. When I first read the street name, it felt vaguely familiar. The movie theater and shopping center I passed on the way stirred something in me too. Nothing specific, just a strange sense of recognition I couldn't explain. It didn't fully hit me until I saw my old childhood house sitting right next to my client's property. I know, it's weird that it took me that long to realize it, that I didn't recognize the address or the neighborhood on the map. But my uncle took me away from here when I was 6 years old. I barely remembered anything about living on that street. My girlfriend, Ellie, said that wasn't entirely normal. She thought maybe my brain had intentionally blocked out certain memories. After parking, I sat in the van for a long time, gripping the steering wheel tightly as I stared at the house where I'd spent the first 6 years of my life. It was the last house on the street, the backyard almost pressed against the forest, with treetops towering over the roof. The house itself looked abandoned, broken windows, empty bottles scattered across the dried yellow grass. It was obvious no one had lived there in years. A heavy feeling settled in my chest. For a moment, I considered turning down the job and driving away, but I had only started my lawn mowing business a few months earlier. I needed the money. This woman was only my third client. She hadn't called like the others. She'd sent an email. "I'm interested in your services. Weekly work on Sundays." I replied that Sundays worked for me and asked for the address. She sent it, then followed up with another message. "The door will be open. Money is on the table. Help yourself to drinks and food." I thought it was strange that she wanted to hire someone who lived an hour away instead of somebody local. But she promised generous tips, and I wasn't about to ask unnecessary questions. Sitting in the van, I tried to remember my former neighbor. Nothing. Another memory lost to my strange childhood amnesia. Her lawn was horribly overgrown. Thick grass reached almost to my knees. The house itself was perfectly ordinary. A neat, well-kept two-story home with a porch. The contrast was so extreme, it was hard to believe the house and the yard belonged to the same owner. I hesitated, wondering whether I should go inside and introduce myself or just start working. I chose the second option. For some reason, part of me didn't want to meet her yet. I couldn't explain why. As I mowed the lawn, my eyes kept drifting toward the fence, separating her property from my old house. It was enormous, nearly 10 feet tall. I wasn't even sure something like that was legal, but it wasn't just the size. Every time I looked at it, pressure built behind my eyes. It felt like a memory, trying to force its way out, while something inside me fought to keep it buried. The strain gave me a headache, and then the memory finally broke through. Hair, long black strands hung down from my side of the fence, tangled and thin. They clung to the wooden beams unevenly, like a shredded curtain. I was sitting on my cheap plastic tricycle. One of the back wheels was missing, and I kept struggling to balance it upright by shifting my weight around. Funny how useless little details like that stay in your mind. The hair moved, and a pale forehead slowly rose above the edge of the fence. Then came the eyes, white and cloudy. I only saw them for a second, but I immediately understood what they were looking at, me. Then a voice called my name from behind me. The eyes vanished, the forehead disappeared. Strand by strand, the hair slid upward, slowly vanishing beyond the fence. A chill crawled down my spine. I tightened my grip on the lawnmower handle and focused on the grass in front of me. I didn't look at the fence again. Surely it had just been my imagination, something my bored child mind had invented. Nobody could peek over a 10-foot fence without standing on stilts or climbing a ladder. And even if they could, why would someone go that high just to watch a little kid playing next door? It was too strange to take seriously, too absurd. And yet deep down, a feeling of dread had taken root and refused to fade. Because that image, the hair hanging from the fence, the eyes watching me, had suddenly become one of the clearest memories I had of that house. Of that time, clearer than anything else I'd remembered in the last 10 years. I shook my head, forced the image away, and got back to work. An hour later, the lawn finally looked respectable again. I loaded my equipment back into my uncle's van. Then I remembered the money. Because of that strange memory, I'd nearly forgotten the most important part. I knocked on the front door and waited a little. The client had said the door would be open, but barging into a stranger's house still felt wrong. After a few more minutes, I finally stepped inside. "Miss Ramona, are you home?" I called, remembering her name from the email address. Silence. The first thing I noticed was the ceiling. It was incredibly high. The whole place felt wide and open, almost cave-like. and it was freezing inside. Goosebumps ran down my arms. The living room connected directly to the kitchen, so I immediately saw the wooden table. Money sat on top of it. Beside it was a glass pitcher filled with what looked like lemonade, ice cubes floating inside, a clean glass, a sandwich on a plate. She told me to take the payment myself. Still, I hesitated. It felt ridiculous to be cautious, but I didn't even know this woman. I grabbed the cash and nearly choked when I counted it. 4 $50 bills. My work cost $60. She'd mentioned tips, sure, but this was too much. What if she'd miscounted? What if she had dementia or something? I took $100 and left the rest on the table, just in case. That's when I heard something upstairs, a rasping sound, wet and uneven, like air being dragged through damaged lungs. Then came 2 sharp creaks, as though floorboards were protesting under sudden weight. My whole body tensed. Someone was home. I stared at the staircase. "Hello," my voice sounded too loud in the open house. "Miss Ramona," no answer. Unable to stop myself, I stepped closer to the stairs, my heart hammering. The sounds replayed in my head. What had that been? Had she fallen? Did she need help? If she was elderly, I thought, I should check on her. It would be the decent thing to do. But another part of me screamed to leave. The feeling came suddenly and violently, like I had stepped somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, like I'd walked into a trap. After a moment, I turned back toward the table. With trembling hands, I picked up the sandwich so I wouldn't seem rude and walked out of the house. I sat in the van for a long time, with the engine off. The sandwich rested on the passenger seat. Finally, I picked it up and lifted the top slice of bread. Inside was butter and raw red meat. I swallowed hard, then noticed something else, long and thin. I pinched it between my fingers and pulled. It was a hair, dark, unnaturally long. When I got home, I told my girlfriend about what had happened, though I left out the strange memories returning to me. Ellie laughed. "You're scared of some old lady?" "I don't even know if it's an old lady," I said. "I never saw the person. It could easily be some guy." "Are you sure? You said she used to be your neighbor," Ellie replied, her expression soft but insistent. That gentle look she always had whenever she tried asking about my childhood. "You really don't remember anything?" I thought about the long black hair again, and suddenly I remembered something else. I remembered one strand getting caught on the fence and fluttering in the wind for a while, before finally breaking loose and drifting down to me, a 6-year-old boy. I remembered catching it out of the air and carefully playing with it so it wouldn't snap. I wrapped it around my arm, fascinated by how many times it circled my tiny forearm, like linen wrapped around an Egyptian mummy. I shook my head in response to Ellie's question, and instead told her about the inedible sandwich. Ellie laughed again and shook her head. Poor woman, she probably has dementia. A week later, I went back. I didn't want to, but Ellie made it clear I was being ridiculous, and that we needed the money if we ever wanted to move out of my uncle's house. I felt sick the entire drive there. Before I even started the mower, my eyes drifted to the fence again. I remembered long twisting fingers reaching down from above. I remembered seeing half a face staring down at me, only the eyes and forehead visible above the wooden beam. Reluctantly, I went inside to collect the payment. This time, she'd left $300 on the table. Beside it was a note written in thin, shaky handwriting. "Take all the money. Why didn't you drink anything?" My eyes moved toward the pitcher of lemonade. I poured myself a glass, intending to dump half of it down the sink, so it looked like I drank some. Instead, for reasons I couldn't explain, I took a small sip. It was cold, wonderful, delicious. And then, the memories came back stronger than ever. That night, I dreamed about food being tossed over that massive fence to me. Sometimes, it was fried chicken, still warm inside a plastic bag. Other times, it was raw chicken with feathers still stuck to its pale skin. Sometimes fresh fruit in cracked plastic containers, or rotten apples and thick slabs of heavy red meat. I remembered how hungry I'd been. I remembered covering the bushes near the fence with a blanket, a small hidden place where I could hide and store the food I was given. I remembered eating like an animal, devouring everything before anyone could find me. I remembered how badly my scalp used to itch. Lice. They bred and bit and crawled, and nobody ever tried to get rid of them. An entire kingdom of parasites lived freely in my hair. Then I remembered the hand. It slipped through a narrow gap between the fence and the bushes, where I sat curled against a tree. The hand was enormous, but gentle. One long finger brushed the tangled hair away from my face. The itching stopped. I looked up and saw only the endless, thin, gray arm disappearing behind the fence. I remembered wrapping my tiny hands around that huge finger and clinging to it, pressing my face against it while I cried. Then I remembered an angry voice. The finger twitched slightly. I let go, and the hand vanished behind the fence. When I looked up again, all I could see was a faint strand of dark hair above the top of the fence. Someone ripped the blanket off my hiding place. A voice screamed in disgust. There was food everywhere around me, most of it rotten, flies, maggots. Someone grabbed my wrist and yanked me away from the massive fence so violently, I thought the bone might snap. "Stop!" I screamed. The third time I returned to mow Ramona's lawn, I got straight to work without hesitation. Something inside me had begun to clear, like a blurry image slowly sharpening into focus. And I realized I needed to finally speak to her, to Ramona. I didn't know how real these memories were, but now all the puzzle pieces were falling into place with quiet inevitability. I felt closer to the truth than ever before, and instead of causing a headache, the feeling planted something firm inside me, something that no longer wanted to stay silent. I thought maybe my neighbor had simply been a kind old woman who sometimes looked after me. Maybe she fed me, maybe she cared about me, maybe she read me stories. Maybe this was the only way my memories could come back, disguised as something else, something not entirely real, but filled with truth. This time, as I started the mower, I never took my eyes off the fence. I remembered soft rhythmic humming drifting toward me while I hid in the bushes beside it. The screaming inside the house always stopped whenever I heard her hum. I remembered being lifted high enough to see the roof of my house. I remembered being placed on a thick tree branch deep in the woods and given a dead fox. I remembered sinking my teeth into its furry flesh, feeling warm blood run down my cheeks. I remembered sitting inside a warm cocoon high above the ground, watching stars appear in the night sky. I remembered running toward my hiding place between the fence and the bushes, shaking with hunger and fear. I remembered someone chasing me. "Henry, get back here right now, you little bastard," a voice screamed. Someone grabbed my arm and jerked me backward. "Mom, stop," I sobbed. "You're hurting me." I remembered my mother freezing. Something brushed against the back of my neck, light and familiar, like long strands of hair. My mother gasped, staring at something above us, terror spreading across her face. I looked up. Then the fingers appeared. They wrapped around my mother's body and lifted her higher and higher and higher. She screamed, and I shouted, "It's okay, Mommy. She's just taking you to see the stars." There was a deafening crack, and her scream stopped. Something shot across the sky like a meteor and vanished into the forest. Arms wrapped around me. They were so warm, so gentle, so careful, cocooning me while I trembled and clung to the warmth. I rose high enough to look over the roof of my house again, just like all the times before, and finally I remembered her face. It was impossible to look away from. She was pale and gaunt, her lips stretched far too wide, and her eyes, they were dark but warm. "Did Mommy like looking at the stars?" I asked. She hummed softly. My hands were shaking. I never turned off the lawnmower. I walked toward the house on numb legs, the sound of the engine fading into something distant and barely noticeable. The front door stood open, just like always. Slowly, I climbed the stairs. A low groan drifted from above, growing louder as I approached. The upper floor was completely open, broad and slanted like a giant attic, and across the room lay a very tall woman. Her skin was grayish, her face weathered, her limbs long and thin. She lay curled on her side atop a soft rug, covering nearly the entire floor, almost like she was trying to make herself smaller. The moment I stepped inside, her eyes met mine. I collapsed to my knees and burst into tears. Horror, grief, and everything I had spent years burying inside myself crashed over me all at once, merciless and overwhelming. Fingers, impossibly large, impossibly long, wrapped around me and gently pulled me closer. I was drawn into warmth, deep and steady, and the shaking slowly faded away. "You killed her," I sobbed. "You killed her, didn't you?" She hummed softly. "Why? Why did you do it?" I asked. She brushed my hair back. My cries slowly dissolved into quiet, broken sobs. "Why didn't she care about me?" I whispered. "Why did she let me starve? Why did she hurt me? I was just a little kid." Her warmth never left me. Her breathing stayed slow and calm, and eventually I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was lying in a bed. Across from me sat an elderly woman in a chair. Her gaze seemed distant, like part of her soul had wandered somewhere far away, and still hadn't found its way back. And yet she kept watching me patiently, without looking away. We were still upstairs. The massive mattress still lay on the floor. The bed had been pushed into a small corner of the room, almost as if it had been placed there specifically for me. "Who are you?" I asked. "What was that?" She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes shifted towards something beside me. I followed her gaze and saw a folded note resting on the mattress. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I cursed my size and my hunger. "But I protected you, sweet little boy, cold and starving. I carried you to the stars, where she could not reach you. I lost myself when I killed her. But she never hurt you again. I'm sorry, please." When I got home, I finally asked my uncle to tell me the truth. I had always known something terrible had happened to my mother, but now I remembered every detail I'd secretly never wanted to know. But now I felt stronger, ready. My uncle showed me photographs. In those pictures, I was a little boy with long tangled hair. My clothes were filthy and torn apart at the seams. My body was covered in bruises, cuts, and burns. In the end, I learned almost nothing new, only that my mother had been a monster, and when she was eventually found in the woods half-eaten, a case quickly dismissed as an animal attack. People called it karma after learning what she'd done to me. I kept visiting Ramona. I brushed her hair and took care of her when she was just a tiny old woman. I lay beside her and listened to her hum when she became something else. I wrote all of this down because, unlike my mother, Ramona deserves to be remembered. I never told anyone about her. They would have hurt or killed her. But I needed someone to know. Ramona may have been a monster, but it wasn't her fault. Even when she lost control, she only ever protected. When she died, I fell asleep, holding her enormous hand. And when I woke up, she was gone. Even though she no longer lives there, even though the house stands empty, I still return to mow the lawn. And sometimes, after the grass is cut, I stay there until night swallows the sky. And when I look at the stars, I feel as though I'm slowly rising above the roof of the house.